Hi everyone, welcome back to Featherstitch House. My name's Rebecca and each week on this channel I make videos about embroidery and textile art to help you get creative. It's the final Sunday of 2024 and I thought this would be a great opportunity to do a finished project reveal of my wall hanging for 2024. I would absolutely love to see your finished version. So if you're not in our private Facebook group, there's a link down below where you can upload a photograph of your version of the wall hanging or book or whatever you have created using these videos. Or you can put it on Instagram and just tag me at Featherstitch House, or you can email me a picture of your finished wall hanging, and the email address is info@featherstitchhouse.co.uk. I would absolutely love to see your versions, and if I get enough photos, who knows, I might make a little montage and put it on Instagram and YouTube as well. So do send me pictures of your work. It makes my day to see what you've created. I'll show you around my finished wall hanging in a moment, but I just wanted to say thank you to anybody that has subscribed over on Ko-fi for next year's project. There will always be free content on this channel, so our Sunday videos will carry on just as normal with next year's project. If you haven't heard what we're going to get up to, I will link the live stream up here so that you can see the plan for next year and make a decision about which one or both you want to join in with and how to sign up over on Ko-fi. I'm so excited to get started. I think it's going to be lots of fun next year and I really hope that some of you will join me. I do know that some of you found this channel late in the year, and although you've been watching along, you haven't made any of the videos but are looking forward to the 2025 project. So if that's you, I can't wait for you to join us as well and get to know this wonderful community that we're all part of. If you don't want to subscribe but you have enjoyed the videos this year and want to make a donation to Featherstitch House to help carry on the making of videos and all the work we do here to get people stitching, you can either donate over on Ko-fi, and there is a link in the description below, or you can hit the super thanks button and make a contribution that way. There is absolutely no pressure. If you aren't able to do that, it's fine. It is my absolute pleasure to make these videos for you. But if you do want to make a donation, it is so very much appreciated. Thank you so much for all of your support this year. It has been an absolute blast. It's been a joy, every minute of it. So can't wait to show you my finished hanging in situ and talk you through the panels and what we did. So we're not going to get stitching, but let's get looking at our stitching. Happy New Year, everybody, and let's go. Okay, so here is our finished wall hanging. I'll just show you how I've put it together, and then I'll just do a quick review of all the panels that we made. So if you didn't do this project, the videos are all still going to be there indefinitely. If you are inspired by this, you can go right back to the beginning and make each panel. Obviously, some of them won't be as topical as they were in 2024 because this was kind of a journal of the year, and so like the August panel won't be relevant. Some of them are standard, that happen every year, but some of them are unique to 2024. But there are loads of textile techniques in this project, and hopefully there's plenty of fun for you to have along the way. So we've experimented and played and just enjoyed ourselves as the year has gone on. So I hope that there's something new and exciting for you there to help you develop your textile art skills. There wasn't tons of embroidery as it happened. We didn't do loads and loads. So there is embroidered embellishments, but there wasn't very much pure embroidery. So if you want some of that, Postcards from the Hedge is the place to go next year. It's over on Ko-fi. All of the details are in the description below, and there's a link to my Ko-fi page on the end card of this video, so you can just click and head straight there. So let me tell you how I put it together. So first of all, because we had put binding on, the backs were open, and as I got a complete row, I was ladder stitching the panels together. So I think there is a video, I'll try and find which video I covered that in, and I will put a link in a card at the top of the screen if I can find it, and if I can't, then I'm just pointing to the top of the screen for no reason. But I ladder stitched them all together, and then when I got 2 rows, so I had to wait until June to stitch the 2 rows together, I then ladder stitched across the length, and I just matched up the beginning and end and eased, because these are quite stretchy, I just kind of eased it in so that they laid flat. So every few months, once I got a row, I added it on. So they were all attached together before I put the backing on. And there was lots of consternation through the year because I'd left the backs open. I'd just bound the edges and left the backs open, and I think people were really worried that it was just going to look scrappy on the back. I actually quite like the backs of embroideries. I think it's part of the story. I have covered them though for this, and so I just wanted to show you what I've done. So I cut some lengths of, this is like jute ribbon. It does fall apart quite easily, so I've got a little bit here. In fact, I'm just going to trim it off because it gets on my nerves. It does fray quite easily, so you do have to make sure you've caught the ends in really well. But I cut loops. I think I cut them to about 10 centimetres, and so there's a good couple of centimetres inside, and I just looped it around, leaving about, how much is this? It's more than an inch. Leaving about 2.5, oh no, it's about an inch, 2.5 centimetres sticking out of the fabric. So that's my loop, and this is so that I could put some dowel through. So I got a length of dowel. This was pre-cut, I haven't had to cut it. It's 10mm dowel, and it sits inside these loops really comfortably. You could paint it if you wanted to. I haven't done anything to the end, but I've just I slide the dowel through the loops, and we've put some nails in the wall that the dowel just sits on, and so I can hang it up like that. So once I'd got all of the panels stitched together, I then cut a piece of quilt. So this is just a manufactured commercial quilt. This isn't handmade or anything. It was super cheap. I got it off eBay. I wanted something that had a bit of structure to it. I could have cut a piece of felt, that would have worked. A bit of old blanket would have worked. And I haven't edged it, so this is just raw edge. And I've just blanket stitched all the way around the outside. I used a variegated Aurifil thread, just an Aurifil 12. It's like a pearl cotton, but it's Aurifil 12, and I chose a blue variegated. It's only slightly variegated, but there are some tone changes. So once all the panels were together, laid it face down, measured it, cut a piece of quilt so that I had about a 0.5 centimetre allowance around the edge because I didn't want this showing on the front, and pinned it all down and then blanket stitched around the edge. I didn't want it to be like a bag though, so I've also stitched around each panel, and I stitched right inside up against. If I bring it up really close, you might be able to just about see. I've just running stitched it, and I stitched tucking those stitches right inside up against the binding, and I stitched around the inside of each panel just to sort of quilt the front and back together, and I also stitched along in between. So I stitched down these joins as well, and I did it so that I came up on one bit of binding and went down through another bit of binding, because otherwise the only thing holding these stitches in place was the ladder stitches joining them together. So if I zoom in again, hopefully you can see these are ever so slightly diagonal, these stitches. So I've come up on this grey green and gone down on the dark green, and I just stitched along each of those joins just so that there was a good amount of quilting holding the layers together. So if I flip it over, if I zoom out a bit, hopefully you can see those lines. They're not super neat. You could, if you wanted to, use a white thread or a thread that matches your backing fabric so that you've got those stitches don't show up as much, but I don't mind it. I think it just looks fine, and it's against the wall, no one's going to see it, but it has covered those open backs that so many of you really don't like. So that's where we're up to. That's how I've backed it. As I was stitching, I just caught in that ribbon, so I stitched through the quilt backing, the binding, and I've pulled those stitches through the ribbon, so they're nice and secure. It doesn't weigh an excessive amount, so because I've got 4 loops, just put 2 at the end and 2 at the join between the 2 panels. So 1 on each corner, 1 at the joins, and that spaces them evenly, so they're not individually bearing tons of weight. You could do it with a sleeve on the back, so if you put a sleeve along the back, you can put your dowel in there, and then you don't have the loops, you can't see the dowel. There are loads of ways of doing it, it's entirely up to you. You could also get those magnetic quilt hangers. Missouri Star Quilt Company do little wooden brackets that you clamp, you screw them to the wall, and then you clamp your quilt in them, so you can switch out your quilts. Whatever works for you. So let's do a little bit of a flip through review. I'll come in a bit so that I've just got one on the screen. So this was January. We took inspiration. We had a really, really wet December and January in 2024, and I live in rural Lincolnshire. It's very flat, and the water table's actually quite high in Lincolnshire, so people do worry that Lincolnshire is going to be underwater in about 50 years if we don't do something about climate change, because it's very low lying. And through January I was still working at a very rural school, and so I had to drive through quite a lot of farmland and rural landscape, and the fields were waterlogged. They were still waterlogged in April when I left. So farmers in Lincolnshire have had a really, really tough year this year. And so we created this watery landscape. We started by using watercolour to create a background. So there's hardly any stitching on this top piece. This was a bit of old sheet, and we just used watercolour paint to create this sort of watery background. We created a landscape out of scraps of fabric, and we added some dynamic stitch. So this is just stitching over those fields that creates a little bit of depth and direction, and quilts everything down, adds a lot of texture. Then we created a tree, a bare tree, using couching, and we photo printed onto fabric. So this was a digital print onto fabric, and we just added some stitch to that. Cut around our print and stitched it down, and then we added some foreground embroidery, so just a little bit of stitch embellishment, and we added some frosty sequins and beads, and then put our binding on. So that was January. That was all about the waterlogged fields and the rain. We also added some metallic thread to add some suggestion of rain. So that was how we started. Now February was a really tough month for me, and I had to take a break in February. We did finish it by the end of February, but there were quite a few videos very close together, and so I'd listened to a podcast called Frank Skinner's Poetry Podcast, and it was about the poet Sappho, whose poetry was basically destroyed in ancient Greece, and so only fragments of it exist. So I took fragments of poetry and we printed them onto bits of fabric using letter stamps, and then we did some weaving. I was also thinking about nesting birds and how they pull together fragments to make something bigger, so we did a bit of weaving, and my snowdrops had come up, so we took some inspiration from that. So we did a little bit of actual full-on embroidery there. We also learnt a bit of applique, some fabric weaving and slow stitch over the top, and then we added on our poetry fragments. We did a little sort of slow stitch piece about snowdrops, and I really enjoyed this one. It's quite gentle, quite sad, I suppose, because I was thinking a lot about my mum while I was doing this, and I think I was really happy with the way that one turned out. So that was February. Then March, we were starting to see some colour coming back, and I took inspiration from crocuses for the colour scheme. We used inks for the background on this one. We sectioned it out into a grid and used different slow stitches to texturise the background in the space that was going to be visible. Then we used some fabric manipulation techniques to create a spray of spring flowers. So we made crocuses, hellebores, daffodils, hyacinths. What else did we put? Oh, primroses as well, and these little forsythia flowers. And then we added some slow stitch around it and put some beads on just to add a little bit of extra sparkle and dimension. And I really loved this one. This one got loads. Oh, we got some blossom in cherry blossom as well. Got loads of comments about the fact that this was overdone and I should have put less stitch on, but this is very much my style. I overdo everything, so I really love it. So you could have chosen to add less if you wanted to, that was fine. So that was March. Now April was my birthday month. It is my birthday month, and I didn't really know what to do. There was a lot of change happening in my life in April, and I wasn't really ready to share that at that point. And so what I thought would be an interesting challenge would be to create a snapshot of this moment in our lives and create a portrait. And I used some quite experimental techniques. So we manipulated a photo and used it to create a template. And so a lot of the shading on the face and hair is done with shapes of felt that we layered up, and then we overstitch with just straight stitch to create some light and shade and detail. And the eyes were the last thing that I did. So it did look really quite scary for quite a long time. But I found it really interesting experiment. Lots of you opted out of this one because it was too intimidating. I was really intimidated by it as well, but I wanted to really push myself and challenge myself in amongst all the turmoil that was happening in my life. And so we created a background of favourite fabrics and colours and stitches, and then we built the portrait over the top, and I put a little bit of my glasses chain on because this is almost like my trademark. I'm always wearing my glasses on a chain because I need them so much. And so I put a little bit of my glasses chain on it just as a trademark. I look at it now, I see all the imperfections, all the things that I would change. So the nose isn't quite right, this eye isn't quite right, the mouth isn't quite where it should be a little bit further over. But actually, considering I had no idea how this was going to turn out, this might be one of the ones that I'm most proud of. I am risk averse. I shy away from challenges often. And to do this on camera was really terrifying for me. But I pushed through and ended up with something that I am actually really proud of. So I think I could do it better and slightly differently if I did it again. Who knows, maybe in a couple of years I'll do another portrait and see how far I've travelled. But I think it captures this moment in time and it achieved the goal. So I think if you didn't do the portrait, give it a whirl, because it's actually a lot more straightforward than I expected it to be. And I had quite a lot of fun doing it. So that was April. Then May was when I did the reveal of the changes that were happening in my life, and I had just left teaching, so I sort of shared that with the world, and we used some sort of prompt cards by Sharon Blackie to create this sort of symbolic piece. So this was a doorway, a threshold that we were passing through, that I was passing through, and I challenged everybody to think about the threshold moments in their life and what they're passing through into, what they wanted to be on the other side. So we created this wall first of all. Well, we made the door first actually. So we made a quilted door, and then we created a brick wall. Then we added some foliage to the wall and some grass, and put these kind of pebbles on it. I didn't want it to be totally stark and barren because there was life for me in teaching, but I made it kind of autumnal even though it was May, because that phase of my life was sort of fading. So it's a little bit like the elves, if you like Lord of the Rings. The world of the elves is always in autumn because their time is coming to an end. And so I thought that would be appropriate. And this door opens, and I stitch behind it what I want to see on the other side, and that was a meadow. And this went wild. People seem to just love this one. I think it resonated with so many people. We made a meadow, loads of embroidery on this one actually. Having said there wasn't much straightforward straight embroidery, but there was loads on this one. Fairly simple though, just knots and only some stitched flowers in the foreground on a background of a pliqué fabric, and then we put some birds in the sky just so that there was something showing through that window in the door. And the meadow is a place of rest and creativity and regeneration, and that's what I was hoping would be on the other side. So that was May panel. I think I'm going to put a popper on this just because when it's hanging on the wall the door flaps open, which I don't mind, but I think it just having a way of keeping it closed if I want it to be closed would be good. So that was May. And then June, we took inspiration from the solstice, the summer solstice, and the planetary parade that was happening. So in June, we had an alignment of 6 planets, which is, it's not unusual to have an alignment of planets, but 6 is quite unusual. So we took inspiration from that. I created a background that represented the proportion of light and dark, and in the UK where I live it was about 70-30. So 70% daylight, 30% dark, and we used a cutting technique so that we cut both fabrics simultaneously and just switched out. So this bit of yellow came from there, and this bit of denim came from there. So I just switched the two, and switched these two, and I think it worked quite well. And then we made our little padded planets, and we put intentions inside. So these are all little pockets, and inside each one is a little slip of paper with an intention, and we base those intentions on what the planet represented. But all of these planets are named after male Roman gods. So we looked at their female counterparts and thought about what they represented and set an intention for 6 different areas of our life that were inspired by those female equivalents of the planet names. Then we added some beads and constellations and some starbursts just for some slow stitch in the background. And I thought this one was quite a lot of fun for me, just different techniques. And I think the idea of the pockets was quite fun, and they all open in different places, so you never know quite where you're looking. So I quite like the idea that there are secrets hidden in this. I suppose just like there are secrets in the universe at the moment. We did a little stitch sample on each planet, so this one was quite fun. I did realise at this point that I'd messed up, because I thought I'd worked it out that 4 portrait panels covered the same distance as 3 landscape panels, but it didn't add up because I would have had a gap at the bottom right corner because there weren't enough panels left. So we did a workaround, and in a couple of the 5 Sunday months we created filler panels. So we put a title panel in, and we signed our work as well. So I made 2 matching panels, one of which had a title and one of which had a signature, and I used a tissue paper technique. So that I initialed a piece of tissue paper, we laid it over the top and stitched through it, and then just tore it away. And these were just pure slow stitch, just a bit of fun, and it works quite well to give a title and a signature to this epic project that we've done through the year. And that solved the problem of the spacing. And so I think it was a happy accident, as Bob Ross would say, because I think it needed a title panel, and there would not have been anywhere to put it if I'd done them all landscape, so it worked quite well. So July we thought about holidays, and we created a holiday postcard, and I used batik as a technique. So this is where we used melted wax and watercolour paint to sort of make our background, painted on melted wax and then painted over it, and then we added painted wax onto that paint, and then painted it again. So we worked light to dark, built up layers of paint and batik, and then we ironed away all of the wax, and it left us with this really sort of splotchy background. And then we added some Zentangle stitch, so just simple stitching to add a little bit of texture and detail, and then we added in some beads and our location. So this year I went to Lake Garda in Italy for my holiday. The holiday started at the end of July, and this was just a really nice one that got me in the holiday mood, and there were some beautiful postcards that I saw posted. I just love this one. It makes me really happy, and it really did work to get me feeling those holiday vibes. It was really relaxing to stitch, so it totally achieved what I was hoping for. It was all done with variegated threads as well, so we didn't even have to keep changing thread colour. The thread added all the texture and dimension for us. So this was just one thread that was stitched all the way across, but it just changed colour as I went. So same here as well. So we played around with variegation in that one, and I was trying to create something that would be really relaxing that you could take away on holiday with you if you were going. So August was a bit different again because it was the Olympics in August, and it was also a significant birthday in our household. So I wanted to do something featuring the Olympic rings, but I didn't want it to be really obviously Olympic rings. So we started by doing a photo print again on our background. I had intended to just bubble print onto fabric, but it didn't work because the paint just spread too far, just sort of soaked in and spread, and it just ended up like a big splotch rather than anything defined. So I bubble printed onto fabric using the colours, the Olympic colours, so blue, black, red, yellow and green. Obviously left some white space as well. And then we scanned that, manipulated the image a bit so that it would come out nice and bright and vibrant, and then I printed that onto fabric. Then we added a medals table, and I did it in a way that if you go along from left to right, the sequin that's reveals the order that they were won. So we won a silver medal first, then a bronze, then another bronze, then another silver, then another silver, then a gold, then another gold. And so that is the UK medals table. I spaced them too wide at the beginning, so they're a bit clustered together at the end. But I was happy enough with that. And then we added on circles to bring it up to 21. I also gave myself a medal. We created a medal using furrowing as a technique, which is a technique that I hadn't used before, and that was to mark 10,000 subscribers on this channel. So that was a significant month for me as well. So that was our Olympics piece, and very different to everything else on the hanging, but I think it was just fun, and it was good to play around. These were all done with different techniques. So the Olympic rings were done with different techniques, and it was just quite a playful one. And for August, that seemed about right. Then September, this took over from the threshold panel as the most popular for a while. It was outdone though. We'll get to that. So this was September. We took inspiration from the harvest that was happening all around me because I live surrounded by farmland. Everything goes gold in September, and so we started off by creating a patchwork background built out of rectangles, and we did some slow stitching on that. Then we created a 3-dimensional sunflower using a sort of bit of weaving with wool in the centre, and I stitched some beads onto that, and then we made our petals out of textured fabric. So these were all sort of tweeds and wools and corduroy there. This is like a boiled wool fabric, a bit like felt. So we made that, and then we added some embroidery to this one. So this was another one that featured some just pure embroidery, and we stitched lots of seed heads, and they don't stand out really drastically, but I quite like that. It's quite subtle. So we found a way of stitching barley, oats, wheat, can't remember what the other ones were, but it was seed heads and grasses anyway. And then we put these bead sprays, and I put a line from the song Fields of Gold on it, and this one went a little bit berserk. This one seems to have been a very popular one,
And I've seen other YouTubers do a sort of variation on this as well as part of their projects for the year. So I was really pleased that this one was so well received, because I don't see a lot of people stitching on yellow fabric as purely as this, and it's not a colour I use very often, but it worked a treat. But the panel of the year has to be the mushrooms, which went absolutely stratospheric. I could not quite believe how popular this panel was. So I took you on a little mushroom hunt through the woods that are just by my house, and we did find actually quite a lot of mushrooms. It was nice. We created a crumb quilt background to suggest a forest floor, just like leaf litter in the background, and then we learnt how to draw the different mushrooms and cut out some felt. And this was sort of very elementary beginner's thread painting, because we used the felt underneath to add in lots of the colour, and it meant that we could just focus on getting some dimension, so getting the shape and the three-dimensional elements of the mushrooms in. So we learn about how to draw different types of mushrooms, added in our thread painting, and then we added texture. So we added the spots on the spotted mushrooms. We added the hairs on the shaggy ink cap, and then we added this sort of foliage at the bottom using wool and textured thread and these little bits of curly fleece. I've forgotten what they're called again, but I do know, it's just my menopausal brain won't recall the word. So we added some of those and couched them down, and you seem to absolutely love this one. It was so popular. So thank you for all the love that this one got. I couldn't quite believe it, but yeah, that has been the panel of the year. I thought I'd step up the thread painting the next month. It seemed a shame to just abandon it, and so we did some pure thread painting on this one. And we started by stitching a hedgehog. So I showed you how to draw the hedgehog, and then we gradually built it up over 2 weeks. So we did the face the first week, and then we did his back, and we made him spiky in the second week, which I think people were worried that it wasn't going to look like a hedgehog because it wasn't spiky, but then the magic happened in the last stage, and there he was. And then we created a leafy bed for him. So we used some photo printing again. So this was digital printing onto fabric initially, and then we did some burning of fabric using synthetic felt, and we used heat. I used a candle, and I told you all about Bonfire Night, Guy Fawkes in the UK, and this very peculiar celebration that we have in the UK, where we basically have a festival that celebrates somebody being executed, which is a really strange thing to do. But I told you all about that while we were making our burnt leaves, and we talked about how to play around with synthetic fabrics to create unusual effects. And then we had a really cold spell as well, so we added in some frost and snow just to show that cold spell. So that was November, all based on hibernation. And then you have just watched the December panel over the last couple of weeks, and this one we took inspiration from Christmas carols, and I chose In the Bleak Midwinter, and we created a snowy landscape background with just some pops of festive colour. I wanted it to be Christmassy without being overtly Christmassy. So we created our snowy background, then we created some musical score, and this is playable. I have lost a bead. I need to stitch another bead on there. It fell off somewhere in the putting the thing together, so I do need to replace that bead, but created some musical score and lyrics, and we just touched some red along the edges of that fabric just to make it come forward from the background. And then we added our evergreen, and I chose ivy leaves. So we learnt how to draw an ivy leaf, and then we used just some really simple stitch to attach those on, and so they're still quite dimensional. They're sitting away from the surface in places. And then last week we made our little needle felted robin using a little bit of tweed in there as well, just to make him look a little bit feathery. And we appliqued him on, and he added a little bit of life and Christmassiness, and I talked to you about the birds in my garden a little bit as well. So that was the last thing that we added, and so that is our fabric journal for Winging It 2024. I've absolutely loved this project. I've really pushed myself with this one. I've tried to keep it really varied. I've tried to do things that we've never done before in any of the Winging It projects. And now it's all together and on the wall. It is an absolute joy to see how much effort and work and learning and challenge we've been willing to take on through the year. It really has been an absolute joy. Even more of a joy is seeing your own versions of these panels in the Facebook group, and again, all the information for that is in the description below. So I've just loved watching you push yourselves and try new things and encourage one another and be brave with posting. I can't wait to see your finished panels. You don't have to put it together into a wall hanging. You could stitch them together into a book. You could just stitch them into a roll and roll them onto something. There's loads of ways that you can present it. I'm sure you're all going to delight and surprise me. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing how you present your finished panel. But that's mine. I'm going to cut in a second to some footage of it in situ on the wall so you can see it in all its glory.
So, as I said at the start, thank you so much to everybody for your likes, your comments, your shares, all the pictures that you've sent me, your posts about your own stitching, all the messages of thanks that I've received. Thank you for all the super thanks, for all the donations. Thank you for signing up over on Ko-fi. I really am blown away by this wonderful community that we're part of. You are just such lovely people, and you make every minute of making these videos worthwhile. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Can I send you my very, very best wishes for a happy new year? I hope that 2025 is filled with peace and joy and love galore for all of you. Stay safe, enjoy your New Year celebrations, and I will be back next week with the first video of 2025. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.